You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Is it Farrar or Farrar?
It depends. I mean, Farrar sounds really sexy and quite posh, but it's Farrar essentially.
Okay. Well, we'll start again, but we'll make that joke again. It was funny. Okay. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King. I am the host of this podcast, and I'm so excited to be creating content again and also to be christening my new nest. My podcasting studio, Flamingo Heights. I've got a beautiful space and I knew I wanted to have someone really special as my first guest. So I have no other than the Ian Farrar, or Farrar. We will discuss that in a moment, who is an amazing podcaster. He's released over 200 episodes of his Industry Angel Business podcast. And he's a very well-known, well-connected professional, but also just a really top guy in the northeast of England, a really great friend and just a brilliant sales and marketing professional. So I'm so excited to have him here with me and to introduce you to him. And that's, I think, enough spiel from me. So Ian, can you tell us all about yourself?
Wow, what an intro. You haven't even got any notes either.
No.
I'm so impressed.
I'm just plucking it out of my mind. Yeah.
You're making me look really bad. I've got normally notes scattered all over. Everything is like carnage 10 seconds before we go live. You are super professional. Well, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We do hope to be professional in a professional studio. Winging it is important, though. I think you're
Professional
right.
studios for hire, hourly rates.
Yes, well, we will release that on our website soon. We still need to work on our packages. You know, it's one of those things where you're trying to do 100 things and getting it all sorted. But anyway, tell us about your name. So is it Farrar or Farrar?
So if you had to ask my mum, she'd probably say Farrar.
Right.
Because like when you're in a waiting room and someone says Farrar, she gets very uppity and like thinks she's very posh. But it's Farrar at the end of the day, isn't it? You know. But it is a bit cringe when people say Farrar or Farrar. But
it makes me laugh though, because if I think of your personality from the outside in, when I first met you, that is how I kind of thought of you, as quite not uppity or posh, but more just like, you know, well connected, knows what they're doing. You know, goes to lots of cool charity balls and events, and you know, so I would have thought that sort of posh kind of vibe. But then you're just one of the lads, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're really
definitely
down to earth, and you speak to everyone, whether you're, you know, from whatever walk of life. That's what I love about your content as well. You've talked to so many people from all over the world, but also very different walks of life. And I'd love to know, how did you get into podcasting? You know, what was your journey for that?
wow, how long you got? I'm going to go back to that bit about talking to lots of people, because I've spoken to many people right across the world. I've travelled the world with work, fortunately, and with my hobbies of travelling. But I think it comes down to values, because you tend to align yourself with people who've got similar values. So, you know, I have spoken to some real rock stars, like, that I would sort of look up to and think, wow, that person's just so, you know, I could never be like that, you know. But at the end of the day, we all pull our jeans on one leg at a time, and we just have to reach out to them and ask them, like, would you be on a podcast with me, or could I come and have a coffee with you? And, you know, 9 times out of 10 they would just say yes. So actually, I like to just remove all sort of barriers like that of hierarchy and stuff, you know. What was your question? I forgot. Oh, where did I start? Okay, podcasting. So I used to love audio books. I might as well start at the start. I'm garbling here. I give myself a target, right, when I was a kid, of reading the top 100 books of all time. And I got quite far through it. I mean, if you've seen Moby Dick, it's like literally this thick. And all those classics were just awful. So I started listening to them on audiobooks. So I kind of cheated. So I was bashing through them. And then I found internet radio. And and I could listen to all these shows in the US, and I'm really into like conspiracy stuff and aliens and all this crazy stuff, right? Secret bases. So I was tuning into all these like weird American shows, and a real hero of mine was a guy called Art Bell, and he had a little studio like this in his lounge, all done up. But back then there was just, I mean, we've got a little sort of roadcaster on the table here. There was just stacks of metal amplifiers and stuff. And it just absolutely mesmerizes how someone could do that from their front room and reach the world. So I guess Apple started pushing with the podcasts. You know, back in the day, it was like Apple Podcasts rather than the new rebranded style. And I could, once I found podcasts, I could search for all the different genres that I was interested in. And then, you know, business for me was something I was really passionate about. So yes, I've got all other little hobbies, but actually when I could start learning about entrepreneurship and business, I got dead excited, because I think you're only exposed to your own network, especially in the Northeast. But then suddenly I'm listening to someone in Wisconsin who's starting a muffin business. I'm like, wow, this is a strange journey. So I was like, why can I not do that? I'm starting my organisation far north. I thought, well, why don't I start a podcast at the same time and sort of document that little journey?
I think that's brilliant. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, when you have your own business, having a podcast can really help you to reach new audiences, grow your own presence as a thought leader, your online visibility, bring leads. It's not really something you would necessarily make lots of cash from in the beginning or anything like that. But I'm just curious for you, have you found that actually having a podcast has helped you reach so many different people and helped you in your business journey as well?
Yeah, definitely. I always say you don't make money from a podcast. You make money because you've got a podcast. It's sort of, as you say, shows you a bit of an authority. It's almost like being an author. You know, back in the day, people used to say, don't have business cards, have a book, and you could show the authority. If you've been podcasting for a number of years, you have that bit of credibility. I mean, you said at the top of the conversation there, I've done over 200 odd episodes. It does give you a bit of credibility. You know, the average amount of podcasts is 7, isn't it? You know, and you have that pod fade where people realise, like, oh my word, it's so much work. And then they just fade off into the distance, where actually launching a business, but also a podcast at the same time, was quite a lot of work. And obviously it has been for the last 6 or 7 years, you know.
But it's also the skills you learn. So you've taught yourself so many cool skills. And I think, you know, it's also the interviewing skills, the ability to think and reflect on what your guests are saying, but the research that goes into learning about your guests, all of that's really fun. Yeah, I haven't been podcasting nearly as long as you, but I remember when I first thought of being a podcaster, one of my goals was to be on the Ian Farrar podcast, or the Ian Farrar Industry Angel Business podcast. And I'm really delighted to say I've participated in a live stream of yours. But one of my other goals was to have you as a guest. So that was why it was really important to have you as my first guest in my new space, which is so cool. I wanted to actually, on that note, speak to you a little bit about that. So I still remember, you know, you get a lot of requests every day, you know, LinkedIn messages, sales messages. Hey, can I be on your show? Can I be on your podcast? And I've seen a couple of things you've put on Twitter as well about this, but I know that you get inundated with requests, as do I and many other podcasters. And I'm curious just to hear in your own words what you think is a good approach if someone wanted to you know, ask you, because you, to someone else, you might feel like a celebrity or, you know, a real heavy hitter if they knew in starting out. So if you could go back, or if you could give anyone advice to anyone who's looking up to you, what would you say? It's
really funny, I'm smiling away because I've wrote a blog about this. I think it's a 20-point step blog. Because, you know, PR companies now will work on behalf of clients, and their job is essentially get them out there, get them heard. And that's what PR companies will be to the majority of reaching out now. We've got a client, I think it'd be great for you. And it's all about that person. Not once have they said, I love your podcast, I see it's number 1, or I've heard that episode 14 was great with such and such, or, you know, I picked up that little bit of gold from that lady who was on episode. They just clearly haven't done the homework. So that kind of scattergun approach just sort of cheapens it, doesn't it? I want someone to come on the show who they know will be a really good fit, not just for ticking the PR box or even getting backlinks from an SEO point of view. So it's basically, like I say, I wrote this blog, this 20-stage blog, and it's just about kind of like saying why, reaching out and saying those things. Like, I really enjoy the podcast. I listened to this episode, and what I took from that was, and then maybe telling me why they think they're a good guest, maybe give me some questions that I might have heard on a previous episode, and I think our guest might talk about that similar thing, and just make it targeted, and you talk about LinkedIn there. You see it on LinkedIn all the time, don't you? You get a connection request and then a big right hook wanting to sell you something. It's just scattergun, it's like that. I'm going to message 100 people and hopefully one or two will pop out. Whereas if you be really targeted and you just send 10 messages, I think doing it the way I write about in this blog, if you did 10, you'd probably get 8 replies. So it's a no-brainer. Really, just take your time and be targeted.
I think that's great advice, and actually I will make sure we put that blog in the show notes, because I remember reading it myself before I approached you to come on my show. But one of the things I would say as well is that it's also important when you create a podcast to know your brand values and who you want to reach. So I do think anyone creating a podcast can reach people all over the world, and you get surprised who listens. At the same time, if you don't have any values around what you're wanting to record, you're in a situation where you don't know how to say yes or no to guest opportunities because you don't know whether they're a match or not. So I think that probably for me, just looking back at my podcast experience, I think that's where a lot of shows or podcasters fall off that 7-episode wagon, because it's just so hard to keep going when you don't know where your direction is or what your mission statement is, what you're planning to do with your stories. So I know I do that with Nurture Your Zest, but I was curious, with Industry Angel Business Podcast, did you have a kind of set core mission or an idea of, I know it's about entrepreneurship and business people and, very interesting stories of people from all walks of life, but was there a particular focus or industry that really interested you or excited you, or is there something like that that really gets you going?
I wish I could say yes, but it just isn't. And it's about people. If you hear me talk about the podcast, I'll talk a lot about how I was inspired by adventures even. And I give a lot of examples about, adventure or climbing Everest, for instance, is one I often talk about, even though I haven't done it, but maybe one day, is a project. It's just simply a project with milestones. So you can kind of link back a lot of stories and adventures, if you like, to business, because actually entrepreneurship is a bit of an adventure as well. And sometimes you don't know what the end looks like. You just have to have the guts to go for it and take that kind of leap of faith. So I talk to all people from all walks of life, because I always believe there's a lesson to be learned in there somewhere. And we can also be inspired and motivated by people. So it doesn't always have to be a certain kind of, sector or anything like that. Just interesting people with a genuine story and, have a bit of authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you don't just want another author who's just written a book. And I know you've interviewed some fantastic authors, just like I have, and will want to continue to, but it's more about the person and their journey, isn't it? And I wanted to ask you actually about health and well-being. So one of the things that I know you do is you do amazing events outdoors, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and for the listeners too as well.
Yeah. So, I don't mind saying I often talk about corporate burnout. I've burnt out a few times. You've probably heard me talk about it. I often talk about the fact I've, been hospitalised a few times. I remember driving home once and I could hardly see out my eyes. I was just absolutely stressed. Hospitalised, ultrasound scans, MRIs, X-rays, chest X-rays, beta blockers through meetings, and it's not good because we push ourselves too much. And that was in the corporate world as well. And from that management style that I was being a part of, that should not have happened to me. Someone should have been able to look out for me and say, Ian, you're pushing too hard, or you need a break, or I'm not going to give you that work, I'm going to give it to somebody else. So for me, mental health and physical health and getting out in nature was always something. Like, I've had to run all my life. It's something I do, and if I don't, I can feel my mental health starting to suffer. It's a bit of an outlet for me. So I take people out monthly on walks, and we call it Carp Away, which is Seize the Way. And we go out into nature and we walk side by side, so we don't look each other in the eye. I think sometimes when you're opposite the table with someone like you and I are right now, you can't transfix your eyes on someone all the time. And sometimes if you are struggling with mental health, you don't really feel that you can look at people. Whereas we'll walk side by side, as equals, and we'll maybe achieve something. It might be distance, it might be a mountain, whatever it might be. But at the end of it, those dozen people you've spent the day with, you share so many issues with them. And at the end of it, it just feels like therapy, if I'm honest. And from a rewarding point of me, I get to stand at the back sometimes and look at 12 people talking and thinking, I did that. I brought those people together. So it's really rewarding for me as well. So yeah, I love nature, and I'm a real advocate for people getting out of the building and making themselves more productive, because they'll often say, I can't afford a day out of the office. But actually, when they do take a day out of the office, they're super productive when they get back in.
And it's also making, it's multitasking, rather than go and spend time sitting in a therapist chair that you've fought for 2 years to get to that chair. Go out with people and talk and be in nature and be outdoors. And fitness is so important as well. And I wanted to ask you particularly about men's mental health. So, for instance, it was recently International Men's Day, and I know that is not all men celebrate that. Some do, some don't. But I think it's really important that we do speak more about men's mental health. The suicide rates for men is much higher, and I'm just curious. You work with lots of different clients, so it'd be great to hear about them anyway, but also the people you work with, or just for yourself. Do you have any tips for men who might be struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, I could talk all day about this. It's something I'm really passionate about. I've been there myself. I've been in some dark places, not just with corporate burnout, but with, relationships and things like that. And it is tough because, as you say, guys might not share too much. I really am heart on my sleeve. I do share quite a lot. I guess my turning point was taking a therapist and meeting a lovely lady who I was seeing on a weekly basis, and not for anything in particular, just talking, and more so her just probing me and just asking things about everything. And it was just amazing. And I tell so many people, do you know what it is? You cannot beat having a therapist. And like across the pond, they're all over this stuff, and they have been for decades. Over in Britain, we're just a bit more reserved, and we wouldn't do that. It totally changed my life. And it's not, the money, it's not like an expensive thing, to be honest, having an hour of someone's time. So if I could say it to anybody like listening, yes, you might go to the pub and have a chat with your pal. That is good, and that did help me. But actually formalising the process and saying, I am going to seek some help. I'm going to put my hand up, reach out to that person and say, could I come in and just have a chat? It's absolutely life-changing. And so go for it, yeah.
It's so true, because even if you do 1 hour a week or 1 hour a month, or however often it is, to have a time that's a dedicated time slot that's just about you. It's not about, a dialogue. Of course you have a chat with them, but what I mean is you've got that 1 hour to really focus on yourself and to be challenged and be probed and explore your thoughts, rather than just worry about the day-to-day, meeting client deadlines, chasing the corporate tasks you have to do. I think it's really powerful. I have a follow-up question which is linked to that. So I know we were talking about men's mental health and therapy and things like this, but I'm curious as well, because you're an entrepreneur, but you also work with a lot of large corporates, with universities, big organizations. And I'd like to know, do you ever feel pressure in terms of what you can and can't say? Do you feel that it's easier being an entrepreneur to be more yourself? As opposed to when you were in the corporate world, or do you feel you've always just been the same Ian?
It's a really, really good question. At the moment, I'll put some context around it. I'm a non-exec for a public sector organisation. I have been for 9 years. When I first started that role, in one of the board meetings, everyone's there with suits on, kind of around a big square table, little microphones at us to press to talk. And I was sitting there from the private sector thinking, what on earth have I just got myself into? And slowly but surely, I've tried to shape that culture. I actually did a culture session with them not so long ago, and just get them to think about, a suit doesn't necessarily mean that you're an amazing person, and you can love each other, you can have fun, you can smile, you can make a joke, and that is totally fine. So yeah, I will try to influence any situation I'm in from a cultural point of view. It's so important to have a good culture. We're only here once, actually, know this, and we've got to enjoy ourselves. And I often speak about clients. If I enjoy in a client, every year I talk about this, about culling clients. You really need to cull a client. If they're bringing you down, you're putting that negative energy onto your good clients. They're bringing the energy down in the room with your staff, and you're probably not enjoying working with them. So get rid of them, and the universe will just answer you and pop another lovely client in there. So I know a lot of people sort of say, I don't really want to lose that client because, they bring about a bit of money in. You'll have the time to then find another client to then do something good. So going back to your original question in terms of is there things I can't say, won't say? No, I'll just say anything. And if I'm not for you, I'm not for you. And that's it. I'm not going to pretend to be someone else.
There is something really powerful, though, about when you decide to shake all those stickers off, the gold stars or the dots or whatever other people put on you, and you just be yourself in your brightest light and brightest version of yourself. It's really empowering because you make space for other people to do the same. And I can see you doing that all the time, and I love it. So I'm glad that you are yourself like that. On the topic of culling clients, I think that's really important. We can only get sometimes we think we know what we need, but actually what we need is completely different. Or when we get rid of what we think we need, that we make space for really beautiful things to come in our life. So I like that idea about being mindful of the clients you let in, also the people you surround yourself with. And so it sounds to me, and I guess this is my question, I'd like to ask about spirituality or your thoughts around that, or whether it's positive mindset or a God. What are your thoughts around faith, and how has it helped you in your business or your podcasting?
Wow. I didn't think you were going to go there. Massively, I'm really spiritual. Wow. You blindsided us a bit there, Ash, because, sometimes that might not be something that people might think about me. They might not see me as that sort of person. I guess my spirituality has been proven to me. You mentioned the word faith, and I was brought up a Catholic, and you kind of religiously go to church every week, and you're supposed to have blind faith, like you believe in something because you have to. That's what faith is. But actually, spirituality has shown me that there is something else out there, and quite a lot is like intuitive, going with your gut. Even meeting people, sometimes it's ridiculous how I'll meet someone or be a place at a certain time or something and think, wow, that was totally meant to happen. And being open and receptive to that rather than be quite skeptical of it. If you're open to that, you'll receive more messages, and if you know what I mean. I'm trying not to be too over the top, but
you don't want to be too woo-woo. I get it. Well, we're both friends with Sarah Crimmins, who is very into her spirituality, and I know she talks a lot about this. So I think I did blindside you there, and it's nice to hear your response, actually, because I think men aren't always as open about spirituality as women, in my experience from some of the men I've come across. So it's really nice to hear that you do feel also that intuition, and I think that also can come with empathy, being able to know that something doesn't feel right, or and I think that's how you can also cull your clients sometimes, because you know which ones you don't want to be around, and you're very sensitive to those vibrations around you, which is really important. For me, I just love the fact that all the great scientists like Newton and Einstein and so many were really interested in physics and energy and quantum physics, and that's why I find it interesting that many of those great learned people were actually really interested in a outside realm as well. So which leads me to another question, and it's backtracking a bit to the start of the conversation. You mentioned you're a fan of conspiracies. So I am as well. I love a good conspiracy chat. And I was wondering, is there a favourite podcast that you like that talks about conspiracies, or that anyone who might be interested in that kind of thing could listen to?
Yeah, I'd probably have to grab my phone and look at my podcasts. There's one by a guy called Charlie Robinson, which is called Macroaggressions. And Charlie really delves quite deep into the way the government kind of want us to bend, especially around COVID. You know, it's often termed as a plandemic or a scandemic and that sort of thing. And I don't want to get too deep into the COVID thing because, people have had losses and stuff. But the way the data is totally inaccurate, or it's recorded differently and that. So it's really interesting to see, especially the Americans are quite open to pushing back at the government, especially with Biden and Trump, and obviously 9/11 was a huge thing that happened over there, and I quite like their bravery to not just accept something but to question it. And I think we should all question things rather than take for granted, especially even from an entrepreneurship point of view. I'm friends with Tony Robinson, OBE, who really pushes the government, especially from things like paying 30 days rather than 60 or 90 days. And you have to have a voice. You have to question stuff. You have to push a bit. So yeah, I do love to hear people that are really making ground moving, sort of like asking good questions. No matter what the answer is, just ask.
But I think those people are really brave because, for instance, someone like Tony, he gives up his time and he actually really goes and advocates on behalf of other people for free. He's doing that to contribute to a better world, especially for entrepreneurs, and to make things more equal and fair. And I think that can be... It's just really powerful when you've got a message and you feel a call to do something like that, but you don't always get people behind you. And I'm sure for Tony, he's had people who've been asking, well, why are you causing such a fuss? Or what's the problem? Or, when are you going to stop? But he just continues to use his voice to have his platform be utilised, to really grow the awareness of this initiative. And I think that's really powerful. And I'd like to thank Tony, actually, if he does listen to this, for his time and contribution, because there's so many of us that really benefit from that, but wouldn't think to actually go out and do it ourselves. And, whether that's any of the activists out there who are looking at, race or gender, or for me, for instance, I've started to be more vocal about neurodivergence and things like that. I think it's really important, actually, if you feel a calling, to follow it. And it's when you don't follow it that I find things go really wrong. So I wonder, have you ever found in your life that things have just you've got yourself in a total tangle, a mess, and then if you look back now, would maybe things have been easier if you had followed a different path? Or that's probably another blind side.
Not at all. And I can't even think of an example, because gladly I have just followed a path that I believe in, and that's not me being egotistical or anything. It's just my values, And I was smiling away when you're talking about some of the things that you've rose, because not many people will take that risk. Ash, not once the genie's out of the ball, it isn't going back in, and some people really worry about that, and the what ifs, and what if people start hating on me. It's a bit like me and you creating content right now. I remember when I started creating content 6-7 years ago, who does he think he is? Why does he do it? Because they didn't have the bottle to do it themselves, maybe, or they were a bit jealous. I don't know what it was, but you have to be true to yourself. And I know that sounds cliche, authenticity is a bit of an overused word right now, but if you're not being authentic to yourself, you will struggle. So you really leaned into some of the things that you strongly believe in, and I've done exactly the same all my life. And it's nothing, I haven't done anything groundbreaking, but I've just kind of walked that path that I believe in. And I think some people protect the careers, if I'm honest. I can't say that, because what if my next job, or what if my current employer, whereas I've been sacked before, I've been made redundant before. My old man worked in the shipyards. He was the first one to go because he had a big mouth. What's the alternative? Sit there and say nothing and get a couple more weeks' pay? No, stand up for yourself, and so be true.
But that's it. If you're not true, then what else have you got? I mean, people can take away your money, they can take away so much, but if they take away your voice, what really have they got? And I think spirit is really important. You know, we all have something in us that helps us to fight and be resilient. And without your spirit, I think it would be a very sad life to live. What you said there reminded me that I know that we are both the star sign Leo, which makes me laugh because I am interested in horoscopes and things. But what I was going to say is I've felt muzzled before in some jobs, as if my voice was gone or I couldn't speak out. Or I've had comments from people, you know, who do you think you are to do this? Or you think you're so cool to be a podcaster or whatever. And what I was going to ask you is... I don't know, like my motives for starting a podcast were never about me. It was about people, and it was about helping people share their stories with the world. I wanted to create a platform to have really meaningful discussions, you know, around my 5 values, which are curiosity, courage, inspiration, creativity and zest. Gosh, I couldn't remember them all.
I'm really impressed.
But my point is that was the kind of topics I wanted to talk about: the tech sector, the creative industries, and just really interesting people. But it was never about me. So I'm curious, have you ever had anyone say anything about you being a podcaster, or have you been surprised by any feedback from friends or family or clients or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. And it doesn't surprise us because I often say this to people: if you don't have any haters, you literally aren't marketing yourself loud enough or hard enough. You're going to get haters in all walks of life, but not many. I'm talking like 99.8% of people will love what you do, or if they don't, they'll just kind of scroll on by. You are going to get, you know, a very small percentage of people who might have a hang-up. But we know it's not our hang-up, it's theirs, right? You know, this mirror thing. You know they're just wishing that they could do that or have the bottle to do that. So... yeah, I have had a little bit of it, but again, as I say, if I didn't, then I wouldn't be doing anything.
Well, you definitely wouldn't have released over 200 episodes because I know when I've helped people learn to podcast and coach them with public speaking and things, one of the key things that people say when they want to start when they want to start a podcast or speak on a stage, is they want to inspire others, or they want to make a difference, or they want to share a story. But the thing that holds them back is always, what if I don't have something that's worth saying? What if what I say isn't good enough? What if people don't like it? What if I don't like the sound of my voice, you know? And it's really interesting because this is all in our mind, you know, and we all have our own hang-ups, and I think helping people to unpick those is my favorite thing. And I know you do that too, especially on your walks, you know, which is great. Brilliant. Well, I think I've exhausted myself with all of the questions I wanted to ask. I'm just trying to think.
Can I ask you one?
Yeah, go for it.
So, you know, when you're talking there about some of the things that you might say, what about going live then? Because this is pre-recorded now, we can stop this anytime, we can chop bits out. What about going live, and how do you feel about live streaming?
I love live streaming. Yeah, we can do it now if you want.
But you know, sometimes people say, what if I say the wrong thing?
Oh, yeah, no.
Like, well, do you normally say the wrong thing? No. Well, why do you think you're going to say the wrong thing?
This is the thing. I actually prefer live streaming. Sometimes I feel a bit silly afterwards, but that's not like it doesn't happen in the podcast studio. I don't actually really edit my podcast much, apart from adding an intro and outro. I think a lot of podcasters will do every and and that kind of thing. I just feel like it's more real to have a real conversation. If there's something really inappropriate, for instance, I did a series recently, I'll not say who it was with, but it was for a corporate organization, and there were a few comments that were not appropriate because it was criticizing the government, and so some of the things we had to tweak. But for instance, in that kind of situation, sure, you want to edit it out, you want to be proud of what you're producing. But at the end of the day, I think every and I mean, people are people at the end, you know, you want to reflect them in the truest version of themselves, and you want people to feel comfortable in your space at your table. So yeah, I'm totally up for live stream, and we can do one if you want after this recording, but yeah.
But isn't it interesting that you bring up that point about, you know, being able to say some things and not others, where this is your gig, Ash, right? You can say anything you want to say, and if people don't like it, they just flick it off. And that's not going to bother or impact your business whatsoever. Now, a large corporate has to walk the walk, be aware of stakeholders, be able to toe corporate lines and stuff. That would hamstring. I would not like to be in that position. I think that's why I love the private sector and entrepreneurship so much, because we can just kind of have a bit more leeway. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yes. And that's why actually my target audience, as in my ideal clients for my new studio, are probably influencers or coaches or people doing some kind of training or some sort of creative activity, or even healthcare practitioners who want to share what they're doing, why it matters, what the facts are about it, in whatever format we create. But I think it's more about really adding value to the listener than it is, to try and be the, of course you will grow an audience and get thought leadership and that kind of thing, but it's much more real, I think. And then those are the people I feel like can really help. So I think it's always good to know who you're here for and who, whether it's personal or personal friendships or in the corporate world, we're not going to get on with everyone, and that's fine. I'm so grateful for diversity of skills and talent, because it's what makes us, get things done. So, but it's so nice as well to be surrounded with people who you really look up to and who really cheerlead around you. So on that note, actually, I wanted to say thank you for being my first guest in the studio, because, you don't have to do that. You get so many requests all the time. But for me, that's a really big deal, and it's a real honor to have you in my space. So I've got one last question for you, and I'm sure you know what it is.
I don't actually, but you're smiling away. No one can see your face, but this is scary. Go on.
So what is your number one word to nurture your zest?
I don't even know this question. Why would I know this question? My number one word, I guess I use awesome quite a lot. That is something I use quite a lot, but I'm not going to have that because it's been used a million times. I'm going to say carp away, because that is the best domain I've ever bought in my life, carpaway.com, but it just means so much to me about seizing the way.
I love that. Everyone's got to go with the word that means so much to them. So carp away. Well, that's a new one. Sometimes we get duplicates. We've never had carp away before. Right. And seize the day as well. Carpe diem is beautiful. Yeah. So I think that's a brilliant word. So thank you so much for sharing and for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ash. That's been absolutely brilliant. And best of luck going forward in the nest.
Yeah. You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.